Today we've got Peter McGee from Marketing Wealth, which he is the owner of, which backs up his years and years of industry experience in marketing, communications, and public speaking. He's going to work with Tyson Villeneuve. Tyson is the founding partner of the Social Concierge, which is a Vancouver-based event planning firm, doing such high-profile things as Dinner on Blanc and the Dayton Cup, and a number of extremely high net worth private events that I find to be fascinating to hear the stories on that side of things. So today we're going to get an opportunity to see Peter and Tyson have a conversation around virtual events.
We're really jazzed to be here and to talk about this really exciting topic. Marketing and branding and events, and how events tie into your personal marketing, your personal branding, is a fascinating topic. And it's one that in my conversations with Tyson, we've very much found a kinship over. It's a great topic, one that we could speak about, I think, forever. And what we're going to do today is, rather than having Tyson give a presentation and myself give a presentation, we're going to have a conversation. The reason for that is we've had several conversations about this already, which were unfortunately just the two of us. You didn't get to see those conversations, but they were fantastic. And while we do have a compass, we have a direction of where we're going with this conversation, the nice thing about having an open dialogue like this is that it can actually go into some interesting places. And so we're really hoping that you do take advantage of that chat feature and send in your thoughts, send in your questions. So what I'm going to do is just kick it off. And Tyson and I are going to have a chat, and let's see where this goes. So the first thing is to kind of nail down what it is we're talking about here. So we're talking about events. So events, virtual and otherwise, because there are, even though everything is crazier than perhaps it's ever been, at least in my memory, and everything has been pretty well locked down, there is opportunity for small in-person events. If you work within the rules and you're very, safety conscious and you take everything into account, there's actually a possibility for intimacy in events, which is a really interesting concept, especially when you're talking about something like finance with clients that perhaps you have clients that don't want to be one of 600 at a venue talking about something as kind of sensitive as their wealth management plans. And so what we want to do is first talk about why are events important. I think all financial planners, financial advisors have, if they haven't hosted events, they've at least thought about it and maybe think something like, well, that's for someone else to do. That's not really how I run my practice. I do newsletters, or I do, really, I'm aggressive on social media, so I don't need to do events. But what I'd like to do is discuss with Tyson why events are important. Why maybe, for reasons that you haven't thought about, events can set you apart from the competition. Tyson, what are your immediate thoughts on that?
Thanks, Peter. And honestly, that was a great segue into obviously what I hopefully feel is going to be a really interesting and fruitful conversation. But thanks a lot to obviously John and Philip for having us as well today too. I'm super stoked to be here and chat with you guys and have this conversation and continue a great conversation that we've already started. And, I think what's really important when it comes to events and, why events are important, even in the financial industry, no matter what. And, this can pretty much be said across the board, is people there need to gather. They have to gather. It's a natural form of communication. There's so many nuances of like language and communication and just expressiveness that don't come through necessarily in a phone call or a Zoom meeting, or even obviously something that you're doing at a large scale conference. But there's a sense of like personal connection that comes, and there's two types of events that really generally tend to drive. There's one which are the large scale type of events where tons of people connect at random, and the opportunity for organic networking is quite high. And then there are a smaller type of event that are very much more intimate, that are more invitational, they're more curated. And, that's where you generally tend to get that deeper level of engagement and conversation, because you're not trying to go for volume. You're going for basically quality of conversation in that event space. And if you bucket down the tons of different types of events that are currently out there and that exist, festivals, conferences, everything, most of them are really large scale events that are very well known, but the opportunity for that interactivity, that one-on-one engagement is very small. because people are trying to hit as many places as possible. But then there's the more intimate types of events. And those are the kind that at the moment in COVID are the only types of physical events that people can really plan for. So, if you look at take these two generic, very, very, very top level, if you had to bucket down events, and there's so many different formats from conferences and again, like sporting events, arenas, concerts, everything, right? But most of those are very large scale that just straight up can't happen right now. And so the only way to reach large scale audiences at the moment in COVID, and definitely for at least the next year to year and a half moving forward, is going to be through virtual events. So what we've narrowed the event sphere down to right now, as it stands, and this is definitely going to be at least through 2021, if not through the beginning of 2022, until actual mainstream events, as we have known them up until of March of this year, are going to be back to full business. And that's kind of what generally government, scientists, everybody is conceding is going to be the reality for the next little bit. Now, where does that leave people in events? And so that leaves us with really only two types of communication that we can still do event-wise. Large format, and which is now officially anything over 50, which basically puts most events in that category. And it doesn't matter what style it is, if from a conference, hotel, banquet, or anything, like even a restaurant, like you can't have more than 50 people. And so what's going to be happening is a lot of companies, a lot of brands, a lot of clients, a lot of investors, everybody knows this now, right? That's the norm. And in fact, groups of 50 are probably going to be shrinking in the near future, especially with new announcements as COVID goes into the fall. So you look at it as this is an important time in understanding both the nature of events as to why they exist, obviously for the purposes of networking and deeper engagement and brand building and storytelling, and also interactive and communication, but at the same time, where they're going now and where they're heading. And it's if you can understand where events are heading and what's at your availability now, you can actually create a solid plan to build your brand and market yourself during the pandemic and break through, what is going to be a very challenging event sphere for the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And I'll pull out something that you said there that I think is really important. If you're waiting, if you're thinking, I'm going to get back into running events, or if you've never run events before and you think, well, I fully plan to do this, I'm just going to wait until this whole thing blows over, and then I'll start. I would rethink that strategy, because, and I think, Tyson, what you've just said alludes to that, being that, if you're willing to put off your marketing efforts, your branding efforts, the efforts to put yourself in the position of leadership and authority, and inspire people to do business with you, and inspire your colleagues to run events with you, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for, really you'll want to pivot your mindset when it comes to running events, and do it sooner than later. Because if you're going to wait until 2022, 2023 to start running events again, there's a very good chance that in that time, others in your field who are perhaps more savvy, I don't want to say savvy, but perhaps more savvy, or have been really leveraging the situation that we're in now and taking notice of it and pivoting properly, they will be well ahead of you. And so this idea that we're going to hold off, wait until things blow over, and then look to start building our reputation, or building upon your existing reputation by running events, you might go about doing that, but I think you're missing a really big opportunity. And so I think maybe what we can do now is I've just alluded to leadership and authority, and while you may not see yourself as a authority in your industry, so among your colleagues, you might not think, well, I wouldn't be welcomed to a national event as a keynote speaker, so I'm not in a leadership position. You might want to think about leadership and authority differently. Is there a core part of the market that you are speaking to specifically? So have you niched properly so that you are an authority figure, you are in a leadership position for that group? So certainly leadership and authority come out of events, come out of hosting events, being seen as putting your hand up and saying, follow me. One of my favorite speakers is a fellow named Seth Godin, and he says that all the time. He says, pick yourself. All it takes, there's plenty of people who want to follow you. You have unbelievable knowledge about how to change people's lives for the better. And there's a whole army of people just waiting to follow you if you were to put your hand up and say, follow me. And events are a great way to do that. So Tyson, in addition to leadership and authority, recognition, why throw events? Why would you put budget behind that? Why would you put your energy behind that instead of something else, or in addition to something else? But why do it? Why bother?
Oh, well, I mean, that one's kind of a no-brainer for me.
The no-brainer for us, yeah.
From an event perspective. But I think, effectively, events are incredible tools for brand communication, for amplifying and your brand marketing message. And I think that, I want to quickly touch back on virtual events and in-person events, because there are currently two opportunities. Because what I think is going to be the most valuable to discuss today as well is really, for everybody listening, understanding where these opportunities lie right now. Mm-hmm. And so what I was mentioning to earlier is 50 people or less, people can still technically gather at the moment. Generally, it needs to be outdoors only. So that's why it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that over the winter season, as most people move indoors. It was less of an issue, although challenging over the course of the summer, but now that it's basically colder and rainier in autumn, and, a lot of people are opting to spend more time indoors. So aside from the fact that most large scale events are pushing virtual anyway, even in the wintertime, some of these smaller, more intimate gatherings are going to be pushing virtual as well, just because of the increased potential spread of an indoor gathering. So those indoor gathering numbers would probably go down. And so if you're comfortable from an indoor gathering perspective, there's incredible opportunity to host some super VIP clients or some potential prospects or somebody or people who are comfortable in doing something in person. You can do that intimately, thoughtfully, and get a really, really strong depth of an experience out of it. Because people aren't gathering very much right now, if you can just bring people together, make sure they're comfortable with it, take those safety precautions, set it in a nice venue, put some tables that are together that are like in groups of 4 or 6 max that people are comfortable, make sure those tables are separated. I was able to be a part of already, obviously in my sphere of work, numerous in-person events over the course of COVID already, and operating and seeing how they work from different companies' perspectives, and working with the governments, working with everybody. But there's a very accepted norm right now of what is allowed indoors and what size of gathering. I'm currently working on an event next week on October 3rd, Saturday night, for the BC Women's Hospital Charity Gala Foundation. It's a big fundraiser. There are private in-home chef experiences that are being purchased at very high levels from high net worth clients that are starting at $10,000 each, that people like David Hawksworth are coming in to personally prepare a meal for 8 guests in that person's home with his catering team. And basically over the course of the event, they'll be able to enjoy the entertainment, the broadcast entertainment, and then have this incredible in-person experience as part of this charity fundraising gala that's going virtual. So what's really interesting in terms of this project is that there's a small, super high-end, super high net worth, very expensive component of the event that allows for these over-the-top, beautiful, highly impactful, small gatherings that have great depth to them, that are very, very memorable experiences. But those are the types of gatherings that, you don't necessarily need to be bidding $10,000 at a charity auction to have. If you're comfortable and you understand how to host people in that regard, you can make those parameters and that type of setting feel comfortable for any potential clients or guests that you have existing at the moment, that you're like, these people need an in-person touch. So that's a good way to do the in-person components. But most of everything now is going to be shifting to virtual, which I think is really important to note. So if you are planning on hosting clients or hosting an event or being a part of an event or sponsoring an event that's in person over COVID, definitely make sure that it is something that is less than 50 people. Definitely, I would say less than 20 or less indoors at the moment if you're going to do anything. But even then, it needs to be something super high end, and it needs to be worth it for you. So it needs to be worth it for the risk. The experience needs to be worth it for the risk for the potential guests, because they're like, man, this has got to be cool. All right, like say theoretically, John's hosting something. It's going to be something really nice, like a nice reception for like 15 people at a beautiful restaurant. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like the tables are socially distanced, and then you've got that in-person moment. You've got that messaging. And I think that there's a really strong way to do that on a tight budget right now as well, because a lot of restaurants are really struggling for business, and a lot of venues are really just kind of fill their space. So whereas a buyout of a restaurant might have been too expensive in the past, or a potential venue for you to host some clients, you could probably go to, like, say, for example, I know the Opus Hotel just reopened in Vancouver. You could probably go there and go, hey, I've got $1,500 or I've got $1,000 and I really want to do this in-person component. You can collaborate with a restaurant and hospitality that brings all that expertise on the back end, do a small buyout with a small spend on food. And normally that would never even come close to their minimum. But under COVID times, you could actually get a really nice venue. So think about places on Vancouver Island that you might not have been to recently that are great hosting spots that typically you wouldn't be able to get. There's a good chance you'd be able to get them now if you're comfortable hosting for that number of people in a cool in-person environment.
That's great. And you know what? And this is why I love this format of this presentation so much, because I was going to ask you something else, but something in what you've just said, I think has really sparked something in me anyway. And that is, in the past, when you're looking at renting out a venue and thinking, well, how many, we call it bums in seats, how many people can I fit in this venue? How much is this venue costing me? And what's my conversion rate? And is it worth doing this? And then you start talking about, an event where you have 8 people or 12 people or something like that. And you think, oh, geez, well, if I convert one of them, is it worth it? What if I convert none of them? But the sorts of events that you're talking about that are really experience-based, it's not just a matter of filling a room full of people and, saying enough smart things to hopefully, convince a number of them to get on board. But what is the shelf life of the event that you're running? How long after the event is done are people still going to be talking about it? Are people still going to have unbelievable feelings when they think back to, this, a hired chef came in and showed us how to make sushi. And it was this incredible experience at a beautiful venue. And there was only 8 of us there. And so while this wasn't spoken about, I felt important. I was one of 8 people that got to experience this. How unbelievable is that? And so anytime in the future that someone brings up, oh, my advisor told me to do this or something, you can't help but talk about your advisor because they gave you this incredible experience. And so that's something that, when you rent out I'll just use an example of a community hall. I'm sorry if people really love community halls, but if you rent out just an open space that has chairs that you can set up, what's the likelihood, and if you're just giving sort of a seminar that talks about corporate class investments or something like that, what's the likelihood that people will not only talk about it, but can't help themselves but to talk about it? In the same way, it's a Brian Regan joke, and he says, never tell a group of people that you've had 2 of your wisdom teeth taken out, because inevitably someone who's had 4 wisdom teeth taken out will jump in and hijack your story. And so that's sort of the same thing, that if you make someone's experience significant enough and enjoyable enough, anytime finance comes up in the future or this industry or just experiences in general, you say, I got to tell you about this experience I went through.
Yeah. And
then apply that to your ROI and think, what would that do to my business if people were out there talking about my business in that way, with that passion? And so I think that it's something worth thinking about when you're looking at the $1,500 to rent out a space. You think, well, I have no guarantee that I'm actually going to get business out of this, but what I can guarantee is that there's going to be 10 people, 12 people raving about me and the experience that I gave them. And that's something that certainly as creatives, I think Tyson and I could say that we're creatives. Your brain really starts working on, what can I do to delight my prospects or my existing clients? That's I know this came up in a discussion earlier with Tyson and I, but Warren Buffett had a video recently with his single piece of advice to business owners is do whatever you can to delight your customers. Don't satisfy them, delight them. And so when you start applying that thinking to events, and what can I do to blow their minds, to give them something they haven't had before and experienced before, to make them talk about me and my business, what can you do? What can you do for that? And so that sort of leads into, and I know you've talked about the kind of overarching style of events, but what would be great, well, you've just spoken about it a bit, but maybe a couple case studies or just small ideas that someone who's new to running events, or even someone that's run a few events before, but never something this maybe thoughtful, some ideas around what can you do with 8 people, with 10 people, with 12 people, that's not going to cost you, $100,000 to do.
Yeah, no, I think, so if you're going to do something in person, and this can apply regardless of whether or not it's COVID, but if you're operating on a relatively limited budget, and it's something that I always abide by, is it's cross-promotional partnerships for other brands that basically align with yours, or that you would like to see your brand aligning with. And it's also how you can really kind of zone in your clientele. I think one of the markets that does extraordinarily well in boutique events and how they manage their guest list and how they get the best ROI out of them is the luxury products world. I have the great fortune of working with Ferrari as one of my clients, and they never invite more than 35, 40 people to an event anyway. And they have like 8 of their sales team there. And they basically make sure that those guests are incredibly well hosted, but they also know that it's worth the expense to host them because they get a sneak preview of the new Ferrari. They get to do all these things that feel exclusive in terms of access, in terms of being the first to get to check it out. But they also know that it's worth the spend on that event because they're going to basically be making $150,000 to $200,000 in profit off of each car. And even if they sell one of them, that event is more than successful. And oftentimes these events end up with like 3 to 6 vehicles being sold out of them, like every single time. But that being said, it doesn't mean that you need to spend a fortune on it. And this is also where the luxury world is really, really good, because luxury brands love supporting other luxury brands. So it helps save them money on their budgets. And I'm just speaking to this philosophically, but at that Ferrari event, Veuve Clicquot decided to sponsor all the champagne. And that way it was a great brand alignment for Ferrari because Veuve is considered another luxury brand on par. And so they would basically go, of course, it's wonderful to have Veuve. Ferrari didn't have to buy all the champagne. Veuve didn't have to put on the event. These sponsorship relationships, the brand value and alignments there. And there was the same thing with Louis XIII. Like Louis XIII is like $3,700 a bottle. And it's just like they were giving out samples, but the type of person who would buy a Ferrari is the exact same type of person who would buy a $3,700 bottle of cognac. And so the Ferrari team got to get the brand ambassador from Louis XIII to come and do these $400 crystal glasses of custom glassware and do a tasting for everybody. It enhanced the overall experience, but it didn't cost Ferrari another penny. So if you think about how the luxury brands work in micro environments, is how they piggyback and also reinforce the fact that they're luxury brands is through cross-pollination. It's through cross-promotional efforts. And by finding other brands or events that are good for you, that you feel good, because that strategy can work no matter how you view your brand or what your target demographic is cross-pollination in terms of piggybacking on other events or collaboration from an entrepreneurial standpoint is a very good way to, on the cheap, deliver a really cool experience. Because if you're looking to deliver a really cool experience, there's a pretty good chance that there's like 3 or 4 other entrepreneurs or brands locally that are looking to do something similar. And if you can piggyback off what they're doing, maybe by sponsoring the event, maybe by tossing in $500 or $1,000 or whatever your budget can afford, if you see somebody else doing an event or something that you're like, I think that's interesting. I think that speaks to me and my brand and how I think my clients would want to buy products. That's a good potential sponsorship strategically for you. And you can also cross-pollinate that way.
That's incredible advice. And I think it leads to thinking in a more sophisticated way about your brand. So it's not just a matter of, I'm an expert in my field and that is sufficient to attract the clients I want to attract. So as an example, panel discussions, either virtually or in person. Panel discussions are really interesting because if I think, so let's say, for example, I'm an advisor, I'm a financial advisor, and in my off time, I do lots of yoga. And because I do lots of yoga, I jive really well with other yogis. And that sort of thing really appeals to me. I have kind of a fitness and lifestyle brand, and along with the financial component, of course. And then you think, well, what would it look like to an attendee if I were sitting on a panel, or if I was moderating a panel of experts from the fitness and lifestyle industry that, names that people know, or at the very least my ideal clients would know, and I was up there with them. First of all, I actually don't need to know all that much about fitness in order to moderate a discussion among fitness experts, because, we can have a few pre-discussions and sort of know what's up there. And just by having, CFP next to my name, just by being in the financial world and hosting a discussion around fitness, people start making the connections in their mind that, in order to live this life, I need to get my finances in order. And so while it's not a heavy-handed sell, just by virtue of the fact that you've put yourself with this group of people, and Tyson, you've said that these other businesses, these aligning businesses, even if they're not from the financial world, are more than willing to come together to do these sorts of collaborations because it's good for their business too. And so if you put yourself out there and say, you know what, I have this idea. I have an idea to talk to folks who are about to retire, who have wanted for years to really get on top of their fitness. They want longevity in their lives. And it's not going to be a discussion around finance, but I'd like to host it just, on behalf of my company, because I love yoga and I love fitness and kayaking and all of this. And, I'm going to get 3 different big names from the fitness world to have this discussion. And so when people sign up for it, they're not necessarily signing up to learn about preparing for your retirement from a financial point of view, but just by virtue of the fact that you are an expert and you're in this discussion, the likelihood that you're going to leave people with really good feelings about you is really high. That's really good. And it's that idea of reciprocity as well, that, you've given someone an experience. And this certainly can be free. You don't have to charge tickets for this. But you give people the feeling that not only are you an expert, even though you didn't prove that you're an expert in finance during this, you were just there and moderating. But you've given people the feeling that this person is interested in my well-being, and it's jiving with the kinds of things that I care about. And so there's your connection. And so I think when it comes to your personal brand, putting some real thought into who are my ideal clients, who does my ideal client aspire to be? Because that's always an interesting question to ask. And how do I market events and sort of craft experiences to that person, the person that my ideal client aspires to be? And when you do that, you can start getting very creative around, what is this event beyond just talking about here are 3 things you can do to prepare for your retirement from a financial perspective. And so you can get very creative, and hopefully your passion really shines through when you do that. Because if you take a presentation that's been crafted for you or for any advisor at your company by the marketing department at your company, and so it's all really laid out there with the facts, perhaps you are very passionate about the facts and that will shine through, but perhaps not. Perhaps there's something in between that you want to focus on, and when you focus on it, people can feel it and people get on board with that. And while we don't have time today, I do hope there's the opportunity in the future to do something on personal branding, because we are talking about events today, but holy moly, is there ever a lot to talk about when it comes to personal and professional branding for the financial services industry. There's a lot to do and a lot of fun to be had. So what I think we could talk about as well is, and I've just alluded to it, but I'm curious, Tyson, of your thoughts. A lot of the seminars that are run in the financial services industry are very information-based. Very, here are the things you're going to learn. You're going to learn 9 tips to do this. And so when you show up, you've got a pen and paper and you've got a list of 1 through 9 and you fill in and that's it. How how can the, call it, average financial advisor transcend mere communication of information? Something that could maybe be Googled. If you Google 3 things you can do to retire well, you get a bajillion articles, lots of good information out there. What would entice someone to come to an event? How do you transcend that? Just a seminar full of information?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's two. I want to shift to the conversation because it's a really good question. But I want to really talk about the virtual component as well to events, and I'm going to bring this exact topic back and question right back into virtual, because I think that at this point, the average person is very well familiar with how they would want to invite people to an event if it were to be in person, and how they can drive that value. And I think that that's something that's solid. And if people, I'm pretty sure everybody here listening has been to at least a trade show or some sort of conference or some sort of event, which is also, of course, all these types of businesses are considered, these types of styles of events are very much considered events. But to answer your question, those are events that people are more or less go to with a very specific goal. They're either going to a trade show to learn specifically about something. You go to IDS because you're into design and you want to check out the new designs, right? So if you're going to a financial related conference, obviously personality helps you stand out anywhere and anyway, and that's a whole branding conversation. But the educational platform in that type of environment is very important because that's what people are going there for. They want to be searched. And so if you're going to do the style of event, though, that's more of a softer sell, which is more around a potential sponsorship or a culture-based event, or something that's unique or a cross collaboration where you're getting entrepreneurial, and getting very creatively entrepreneurial right now is massively beneficial in the pandemic, because the one thing that you're going to find, the more people that you talk to, and I know we talk to a lot of people, Peter, you and I, but I'm just saying the more people that you talk to, and also from a financial advisor standpoint, and finance is something that everybody's paying attention to right now. And I think that that's something that nobody can understate, is that everybody, because of the pandemic, is looking 5 times closer at their finances than they ever have before. And so the information is actually something that people are craving right now, ironically enough, And so if you can tailor any information on understanding that people are going to be stressed through the next couple of years, at the very least, through the pandemic, and that everybody's going through it simultaneously. And so when you look into you thinking about it that way, and everybody's needing to make these adaptations, everybody's needing to learn, that goes for businesses as well as individuals. And so I think that people who work in finance right now and in insurance and are in a huge power position, because most people really want that information right now. And if you can find a very engaging and creative way to distill that educational information that you're used to giving out to your clients one-on-one, but you can either put it together in a package or a PDF, or do something that's visually engaging as well. Or maybe if you're comfortable in front of a camera, do some self-YouTube videos or pre-recorded video content that you can have as snippets to kind of also speak to other people, or potentially slide in as a sponsor. That can also put you in a very visible position of authority, because not everybody in finance is going to be doing that right now. And so, to your point, where it's like you become an expert by being there, because people want that information, but they still want it in a way that's palatable and easy for them to consume. I think one of the most important things that we need to also really recognize is that, right now, attention spans are very difficult to maintain with everybody, between the constant news and the pandemic updates and all the adaptations and changes people have to make to their daily lives and their daily schedules, and then their extended families and their immediate families. There's a lot of things constantly coming at people from social media and just news in general. So it's very, very difficult to maintain people's attention over, a longer period of time. And so one of the things, especially when they're watching videos, And so video is basically the king of content right now in our digital sphere. And so making sure that even at the very least, I would recommend recording like a minute to a minute and a half video of just who you are, what you're about, and your basic services, like the quick 1.5 to 3 minute elevator pitch of you. And if you have a website, put that on there. If you have that's something you can share on it, be like, if you're comfortable, be like, toss up a financial ask me. It's called an AMA. It's like ask me anything. Maybe set up a segment where it's just like, no question is a dumb question. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We get that you're looking at your finances. We get that you're looking at how your spends and savings are going to change. This is a great, like everybody's paying attention to it. So this is a good time to be that purveyor of information, but you need to find a creative way to make it punchy and get out there and put yourself out there digitally if you're comfortable with it. And I think that you can make a lot of headway in the virtual sphere by having a stronger digital portfolio of your own personal brand.
And I would add to that, if you're not comfortable with it, perhaps ask yourself why you're not comfortable with it and if you'd be willing to get comfortable with it. Because that's something, if someone's never done a video of themselves, they might think, well, that's too scary. So I would say don't start with live video. Don't do a Facebook Live event or something like that, because that's the ultimate scary for someone who doesn't know if they're any good on video. So take your smartphone, we've all got them, and when you've got a little bit of time, record yourself saying something to the camera for 30 seconds. Just introduce yourself and then watch it back and think, oh, I didn't know that my eyes blinked so much as I talked. Or, is that what my voice sounds like? Or boy, do I ever stutter. Or it took me a long time to get to the point of what I was saying. And just do it over and over again. And you'll get much more comfortable and much more confident to where when you're given the opportunity, or when you have the opportunity to take the opportunity, you'll take it and say, yes, I will do this because I feel confident in doing this. And that, I think, and you really touched on this for sure, is that you want to get your face and your voice in front of people. There's this idea of perceived risk that I talked with a lot of advisors about, which is this idea that I have all of the information that people need in order to live well. Why aren't they contacting me? Why aren't they attending meetings with me? Don't they want what I have? And you sort of need to think about, what is the perceived risk of coming to meet you if they've never had any exposure to you before? It might be a trap. People are vulnerable when it comes to their finances, and perhaps they have misgivings about the whole industry based on, a movie they saw or whatever else. You want to put your face and your voice out there so that people can tune into your rhythm. They can get a sense for who you are. Tyson, you and I have never met in person, but we've now had 3 conversations over video. And even if I just watched video of you talking, I feel I'd get a sense for you. I'd get a sense for your cadence, so that my feeling of risk in reaching out and contacting you lowers a lot. And so when people start registering for appointments or webinars or whatever it might be, you'll see the attendance rate go up quite a bit, because if you've done the pre-work of putting yourself out there, speaking to camera, maybe speak a lot to camera, maybe you do a weekly tip or something where you're talking and people can see and hear you talking, you'll have much more success in really every stage thereafter, in having people attend, having people act on the call to actions that you set forth. And so while it may be tempting to, I don't want to put my face out there, so I'll just put up a PowerPoint presentation and I'll talk over top of it. But really people are just going to see the slides. You might be successful in communicating the information that's on your slides, but you'll be far less successful than you could be at garnering trust and having people feel like, yeah, I'd love to see whatever else this person has, and call and talk and have a video chat and all those sorts of things. So the importance of, yes, your face and your voice, and which I would definitely go about picking up your phone and practicing, because you might think you have an energy that you really think is infectious and you want people to get a sense of your energy. But if that energy doesn't come across in your video, practice it until it does, so that folks get a real sense for you and for who you are. So on to the next, unless there's anything, Tyson, that has come up so far that you really want to jump on. And I will say, I wanted to mention, sorry, I'll cut you off. It's hard to keep people's attention. Nobody's left our presentation. So I want to say we're doing something right with this conversation. I can see the same number as when we started. So happy about that. That's great. But
yeah,
sorry,
no,
go on.
it is good news. And I think that, but it's the type of, and that's actually one of the reasons why we changed this formatting, because, it's way more engaging for listeners. Podcasts are huge right now. It's way more engaging for listeners if you can be part of a team of people presenting together or part of a conversation together, so that there's lots of voices in the room and it's a lot more organic and it's a lot more interactive that way. And I think that people stick around like that. I think what's really important is that, people, business people, event producers definitely have to do it this way. But a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, and leaders need to also start thinking about how they can think like broadcasters. And, broadcasters, if you're looking for a quick tip of, how you might want to present yourself from a digital standpoint, think of your favorite shows, or think of how the celebrity interviewers do it, like Stephen Colbert on the A Late Show, or Trevor Noah, or whatever your jam is. Those guys are masters at the quick interview sound bites. They do fun little graphics. Look at the news. CNN has the little tickers underneath the names and the infographics, all that type of stuff. So if you can add, if you're savvy enough, or if you want to spend a little bit of money and go to a digital graphic editor and go, hey, here's $250. Can you make my video look like something a bit more CNN-ish? With your name underneath it, your designation, some of the contact info, a couple things out there. Think about that, because those are big visual hooks for people. And the other thing that we've done and learned, because my agency, The Social Concierge, we've shifted completely into virtual events for about 90% of our business right now, 95% of our business. So, we basically in the last 4 months, or actually 6 months now, I can't even remember how long we've been in the pandemic, because it just feels like 2 years already. We've had to basically completely change how we operate and design our events, and, owning a bunch of different events nationally and producing events internationally. But we also do a lot of consulting. But right away, we knew we needed to pivot into virtual, because it was the only thing that would be COVID safe. And I think that this is one of the other things that's going to be really important about virtual events, and also how you brand yourself is, we all know that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I just want to bring this up, because at this point, I feel that most people don't need to say we're in unprecedented times anymore. We all kind of get that, there's we're all in this together, all those types of things. That messaging now seems very passé. So try and avoid that messaging in your stuff, because it comes across as now, oh yeah, Canadian Tire is using it, so I should use it too, kind of thing. It's everybody knows that that groundwork's been set. So if you do use that type of language when speaking about the pandemic, it's more marketing gimmicky coming across than as naturally authentic. And I think that's something that's really important, is, being aware of what's going on in the pandemic. It's not like we aren't, but socially is more important than ever, because there's a lot of sensitivities around how your guests or clients or consumers would behave. And a lot of their behavior patterns are actually changing, and they're changing drastically right now. And that's why this not only shift into virtual, it's important for you from an events perspective to understand what a virtual event is actually, because a lot of people still think, you bring up virtual events and there's oh, I'm so over Zoom. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I've done 8 Zoom meetings today and I just don't feel like doing a Zoom event. And I'm no, but that's cool, but that's not what a virtual event is. And then on the flip side, you've got somebody that's well, I like virtual events, but I don't have the budget and a VR helmet to put on, and where am I going to walk around, and I don't how was anybody going to see me in this full 3D immersive environment? But that's not it either. Virtual reality is a totally different thing. And what virtual events are is this emerging incredible sphere, and it's really important to understand them. Virtual events right now are a $76 billion a year industry worldwide that's supposed to 10x in the next 5 years because of COVID, because all these big conferences and international meeting places and everything, they all have to go virtual because it's the only socially responsible way for large people to gather, and it's the only consistent way for people to gather across borders that is safe, because every country is at a different level, every province is at a different level. And so, like things that you can even do from an events perspective here in BC, you can't even do in Ontario right now, or Alberta, or anywhere else, because everybody's at a different place with the virus. But what virtual events brings to the table as an added benefit, even though it might seem somewhat daunting to kind of dip your feet into it, is there's 3 key things to know about virtual. One, they're not going away, and more companies and brands are going that direction. So look for huge advances in big virtual conferences. So the types of big conferences that you guys might not necessarily go to all the time, like getting on planes and flying across the country for 800 to 1,200 people or whatever, that's a great networking experience. Those types of experiences are still going to need to happen, and they are going virtual. I'm currently working in the real estate world right now, where like developers are putting together massive virtual conferences that were already very successful across North America. But here's the kicker, and this is what's really important to note about virtual events. Virtual events can break down geographical barriers like that. And so when a lot of people are thinking, why go to an event or why do something when all my clients are local? And, it's like, okay, well, say it's like I live in Victoria. I'm only going to deal with Victoria-based clients because typically that's where your clientele would come from. They're geographically bound. But there are 2 things that are very convenient about finance and virtual events, neither of which are they're just not geographically bound, and they're both, and there's universal need and understanding for both, right? Because people have to connect, and they can connect anywhere, right? So I've had people now tune into my virtual events from Honduras, and I'm just like, I don't know anybody in Honduras. And it was like a friend of a DJ who met this person who was cousin who saw the thing, and I was like, yeah, I just thought I'd check it out. And that's something that's incredibly interesting. You can promote something locally, you can promote something from Comox, and you could have somebody from New York tuning into it.
Right.
And that's something that's massively beneficial. So when you're thinking about the benefits of virtual, is you no longer have to think, I'm just going to service my regular clientele. I'm just going to service the people in my area. You now have a completely carte blanche opportunity to go after, because people can invest with you from wherever, right? They don't have to be 2 blocks away. They don't have to be in the same neighborhood. And I think that that's something that's really important to consider as well when you're thinking about, why would I pivot into virtual, and what's in it for me? And this seems like a lot of tech and a lot of confusion, and I don't really know what's going on. Well, there's actually massive opportunity in it as well. And also, it's important to understand the basics of virtual events as before you start maybe signing up and paying to go into these virtual conferences and taking booths on them, right? Because that's going to become the new norm. So just so you...
And you might say, based on that, previously it was really difficult to become recognized internationally or even nationally as an expert in your field. I mean, you need to be welcomed as a keynote speaker at least a few events, and you got to fly off to Toronto and do something and elsewhere. You might say that it's actually never been, I don't want to say easier, but the barriers to becoming a nationally or internationally recognized expert in your field, those barriers aren't there really as they were before, based on exactly what you've just said, that if you have a topic that's compelling enough, and if you put some marketing behind it in order to attract eyeballs from wherever, really, you can have attendees from around the world. And even if you're not selling to 99% of those people, and perhaps it's just an ego thing, but really, I mean, if you think about your personal brand, once you start accumulating those sorts of speaking opportunities and event opportunities, virtual event opportunities, that's something that you can say about you and your business. And it also will expose you to different experts everywhere in different fields, and really grow you as a professional as well. And so this idea, I've always been very fond of the idea that unless you have to do things locally, so if you're let's say a barber shop. And really, unless you're a very famous barber, people are really not going to travel very far. You're working with a geographic region. Unless you have to be a business like that, why not go virtual? Why not spread your word as far as it can go? Because you have something important to say. You have knowledge, and I suppose this is another thing to think about as well, is you might think that the information that you have, the expertise that you have, is common knowledge. That, oh, everyone knows about asset allocation. No, they don't. They really don't. Even people who are very successful in their own field, whatever that might be, there might be a very successful business owner, may know squat about asset allocation. And you think,
I don't know very much about
you don't know
allocation.
I hope everyone on the participant list has just heard that, because I think you're going to get a whole bunch of emails, Tyson. But that's something that it's called it's called the curse of knowledge, or at least that's the Donald Miller term of the curse of knowledge, that because you know so much about a given thing, you tend to think other people know that as well. You take that as given. And because you think they know that, that influences the way that you communicate with them, and you communicate at too high a level, and you go over too many people's heads. And the idea is that if you're an expert at something, you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you're at a 10, let's say. And our tendency is to drop it down to about a 6 to people who might not be an expert, to people who are not in the know. And really, you should drop it down to about a 1 or a 2. And the hesitation that a lot of experts have is they think, well, that would be patronizing. I don't want to offend them. You won't. Really, you won't. And so you can very easily take that into the world of virtual events as well when you're crafting a webinar, to say, how do I bring this down, not in a way that you're speaking to a bunch of second graders, but really bring it down to its granular pieces, so that understanding happens. It's not just communication of information, but, oh, I really get it now. I really get what asset allocation is, meaning I'll be much more open to a conversation about it, rather than try to protect my ego, protect the fact that I don't know anything about it. And so I don't want to talk to an expert about it, because then I'll feel stupid, and nobody wants to feel stupid.